y'all good night. Jake Reese, you are the lyingest little man. And I can understand a big man telling that many lies. He can carry it around. Jake, get help to carry the lies. My favorite Jake Reese lie of all time. First of all, 3/4 of that. But my favorite Jake Reese lie of all time was he was introducing me and he was telling the crowd about what a great humanitarian I was because I had come upon an elderly woman in a wheelchair, and she was trying to negotiate the steps of a building where I was speaking, and I, being the kind of guy I am, and being not possessed of some physical strength to make up for what little bit of mental ability I had, I just lifted her up, chair and all, carried her right into the venue, sat her down. Jake told the whole crowd that. Everybody in there is looking at me like this. We knew we liked him. But anybody who would have witnessed it would have noticed that the elderly woman in the wheelchair was about 19. And she only had on an ankle cast. And I indeed did pick her up and carry her into the venue. But I wouldn't say that humanitarian is. And Jake told that whole lie without one crack appearing in his lying face. I never turned down a chance to come home and talk for the simple reason that something that Pat Conway told me, he said once, do you save the letters from the people who write you? And I've lived in 14 cities in the past 20 years. And I told him, I don't save them because, gosh, I'm always going somewhere. I live out of a duffel bag. Those who knew me before I got a little older know that I slept on the mattress on the floor and I lived out of a duffel bag. So I didn't save all the letters that people sent me. And he told me, one of these days, you'll wish you had. One of these days, every letter will be precious. And I've already come to that conclusion. And all that said, it's really not any more valuable a time to spend than spend it here. I mean, this pretty much is parallel. This part of the state is the heart and soul of shouting in Avis Van, and will be the heart and soul of the new book. And so it's very easy to come home, and it's an honor to be asked, and that's not just something you say. It's an honor to be asked. If for no other reason than I look out in here and I see so many people that I have talked to before, folks that I've met a dozen times at book signings. I am so grateful. The talk today at UAB, I don't think they were spellbound. I think they were asleep. Talking to grown-ups, and that's why I'm not that y'all have a little bit of age on them. Talking to grown-ups about books is easy. We love books. Books are, I mean, books are just such beautiful things. I mean, they even took Jake out of business where he made enough money to burn a wet dog, and now, you know, I feel a lot better about Jake's dedication to books if I didn't know he hadn't already packed several motor homes full of $100 bills and parked it out behind Legion Field. But I've taught books with people in this room for a long time. But what I thought I'd do tonight, if it's okay with y'all, is read a little bit from the new book. I wish it were coming out sooner, but the truth is, this one was hard. And this one was hard. It took an awful lot of work. I didn't interview everybody my daddy knew, but I tried, and only found. And the bad thing about interviewing people, you know, who have lived a lot of life, or would have. My daddy died young. He died. My daddy died before good, right middle age. But the people that knew him and loved him, many of them are gone now. So I had to work hard just to find people who remember him. And it was just hard. It was just hard. Those of you who read all over but the shouting, there's no reason for me to explain why that was. You know, I just beating that dead horse. It's always been my favorite cliche. Beating a dead horse. Not because it sounds good, but because of the visual image. You can't just let that run through your mind just a minute. Yeah, my Uncle Jimbo really did win a $20 bet by eating a bologna sandwich sitting on a dead mule. That really happened. But that is not as good a story as just imagine, just sitting on a dead horse, beating the mortal hell out of it, and expecting it to take you somewhere. It's a lot like marriage. One of the ways to get people not to be mad at me for taking so damn long is to read you a little bit of what's coming. That way, if you decide you don't like it, you can stop waiting. How many of you, by show of hands, have ever, and I'm not asking the skinny dipping question, how many of you have ever played in a stream or creek? Then you'll recognize the first few pages of this book. It's called Prince of Frogtown because my father grew up in the mill village in Jacksonville, Alabama. The mill village was divided into sections, and within those sections of the mill village were neighborhoods just as distinct as in any rich neighborhood, just as distinct. And he lived in a part of the mill village called Frogtown. And I asked someone once, I said, why do they call it Frogtown? He said, because it had frogs. And it was low. It was lonely. It was D Street mostly. D Street, because they figured them poor people didn't deserve names. They just gave them letters for their streets. It fronted the Congregational Holiness Church. It was quite enough. But as I was driving, I inherited a 10-year-old boy when I got married because God really likes me. And when I inherited that boy, I took him with me to drive him around my daddy's old neighborhood. He was utterly uninterested. You know, he just was utterly uninterested. I showed him the spot for the police chief. A man named Whiteside was shot to death during an argument over a water line. Showed him the places where my daddy would pole vault across the sewage drainage They called it Creek. I'm not making this up. It was called Shit Creek. He wasn't interested much in that, but he did chuckle at the name. His mama went to the Second Baptist Church in Memphis, and his grandma and grandpa are both deacons, so he doesn't get to hear much cursing. And when we pulled into Frogtown, I told him what that neighborhood was called, and it just popped into my head. My father ran a gang of little boys in Frogtown, 12, 13, 14-year-old boys, and he was the leader. And it just came to me then as I was talking to the boy that my father was the prince of Frogtown. So that's where it comes from. The water so fine, a few minutes of bad memory all but disappear downstream, washed away by 10,000 belly busters, a million cannonballs. Paradise was never heaven high when I was a boy, but waist deep. An oasis of cut-off blue jeans and raggedy Converse sneakers, sweating bottles of knee-high grape and orange crush, and this stream. I remember the antidote of icy water against my blistered skin, and the taste of mushy tomato and mayonnaise sandwiches unwrapped from twice-used aluminum foil. You might remember that. I saw my first water moccasin here, and my first real girl. And being a child of the foot washers, I have sometimes wondered if this was my Eden and my serpent. If it was, I didn't hold out any longer than that first poor fool did. It took something as powerful as that, as girls, to tug me away from this tribe of sunburned little boys, to scatter us from this place of double dog dares, blow pops, stolen cigarettes, cherry bombs, Indian burns, chicken fights, all-day suppers, and giggling half-wit choruses of bald-headed man from China. Maybe we should have nailed up a sign, no girls allowed, and lived out our lives here to fight mean bulls from the safe side of the barbed wire fence with a cake cut from a red tank top, and duel to the death with swords sliced off a weeping willow tree. I don't know what kind of man I turned out to be, but I was good at being a boy. Then, thrust to the heart only bent against my chest, in a place where I could look straight into the Alabama sun through a water-smooth nugget of glass and tell myself it was a shipwrecked emerald instead of just a piece from a broken bottle of Mountain Dew. The stream began in a jumble of rocks beside the Piedmont Highway, bubbling up cold and clear a half mile from my grandmother's house. There always smelled of coconut-scented suntan lotion and lighter fluid. And in summer, the white gravel parking lot filled with church buses, poodle walkers, and weekend Hell's Angels who might have been born to run, but now lugged along well-fed wives in white go-go boots and polyester pantsuits rolled into the Some of y'all have been there. It was a lovely boy, but a boy, a genuine boy, can have no real fun with so many Presbyterians buttering around. And so many mamas in one tight place. But if you followed the water a meandering half mile to the west, through a dark, spider-web, monster-infested culvert tall enough for a small boy to run through, all the picnickers and weenie roasters vanished behind a curtain of gnarled, lightning-blasted cedars and thick, dark pines. The stream passed under 4 strands of barbed wire, and yes, I did count them. 4 strands of barbed wire flowed through a sprawling pasture studded with wicked blackberry thickets and the rusted hulks of old baling machines, then rushed into a dog leg against a high red clay bank. Here the shin-deep water pooled into a clear, cold swimming hole, made deeper by the ragged dam of logs, rocks, and sandbags we built just downstream. This was our place. From a running start, I could leap clear across it, heart like a piston, arms flailing for distance, legs like shock absorbers as I finally touched down. This is where I learned to take a punch and not cry, how to dodge a rock, sharpen a knife, cuss and spit. Here, with decrepit cowboy hats and oil-stained Bama caps on our heads, and the gravel of the steam bed sifting through our toes, we daydreamed about Corvettes we would drive, wondered if we would all die in Vietnam and where that was, and solemnly divined why you should never, ever pee on an electric fence. Some have been there too. This is the last place I remember having much peace of mind. It is where I lay still shaking from the water and let the sun simmer me to sleep. My feet and legs slick with my nail polish to suffocate the chiggers that hitched a ride with me the day before. You have to explain lines like that to your Yankee editor. You have to make it plain to her that it ain't nothing dirty. I would wait hard to the bite of a horsefly, or soft, to a faint, far-off rumbling in still blue skies and the frightened calls of a mother who always, somehow, foretold the storm. A few times I took a book. It was hard to read with your brothers pelting you with day-old cow patties and green pine cones. And besides, in those days of bloody adventure, the boxcar children moved a little slow, and the Hardy Boys didn't have nothing on me. My mother tried to open the outside world to me in the only way she could, by taking home a volume every Friday morning from the discount encyclopedia sale at the A&P. But the sale ended too soon and the world stopped at the letter K. Kyoto, Kyushu, and Kizilkum. I didn't miss the rest of the alphabet or the world. Not here. The only thing that could force an end to those perfect days in that perfect stream was the dipping of that almighty sun, sinking into gun smoke, hot cornbread and cold buttermilk, and a preemptive if I should die before I wake, as a shorted out electric fan droned off and on in the window by my bed. Somewhere out there my father drifted from ditch to ditch in a $100 car. We were free of him then, free of him for good. Yet sometimes, when I'm wading through my memories of this place, I find the pieces of another day. A day told to me as much as it was truly remembered, because I was so small. My father was still with us then. His loafer spit shined, his creases sharp enough to cut you in two. And he would have smelled of ivory soap and Old Spice and a thing that splashed on respectability. It is not the best or worst story I have of my father, but it is worth telling if only because, this time, he was innocent. And it goes on to talk about a day when I was a little boy. We gathered at my grandmother's house, as all of y'all gathered, on Sundays. And there would be gospel music coming from the radio or the television. I remember the Florida Boys and the Dixie Echoes. The announcer would say, "Here they are, folks, from Pensacola, Florida, with sand in their shoes." And it sounded like the most exotic thing I've ever heard. And there would be the hot grease smell of frying chicken. And my grandmother, Ava, who I wrote about in Ava's Man, who never really recovered from the death of the one man she ever considered worth a breath of air, would nod to that music and drink. The yard was chaos and tricycles. The red dirt and spring grass covered in pink-faced children, crying, laughing, screaming, fighting, bleeding. Doll heads bounced across the red dirt. Diapers, don't tell me y'all ain't seen it. Diapers were lost. That was never a pretty sight.